Most of your RPG gaming experience involves walking. Walking slightly faster. Walking slower for dramatic effect. Walking down creepy corridors. Walking from shop to shop. Walking from quest to quest. Walking from fight to fight. So, how do you make walking feel urgent? Well, you can set things on fire. Nobody wants to hang out and loot things while things are on fire, right? You can slap a timer on it, even if that timer is so long that you have to literally stand around and do nothing for umpteen minutes to find out what happens if it runs out. Yes, this is one way to get a game over. But we're here to talk about the music, and how this insane rework of Bombing Mission makes you feel like you're seconds away from death. In the original game, Bombing Mission was your constant companion through the entire reactor sequence. It plays as you approach the reactor. It returns for the boss fight with the Scorpion Sentinel, and it continues right through your victory screen and into the escape sequence. The remake revisits that theme in Scorpion Sentinel, blending it with boss music you wouldn't have heard until much later in the original game. We actually lose a lot of momentum here that was preserved in the original by not continuing the music. After you finally defeat that boss, oh man, I just love that piece. You get a very brief silence before these horns mimicking a siren creep in. So much for loss of momentum. That siren sound of the growling horns and the appearance of the timer on the screen tells you it's time to move.
Go, go, go!
This opening is Bombing Mission, but oh boy, does it have a different feel. When we heard Bombing Mission before in the remake, it faded in on strings, preparing you to wake up and get moving. We've just had one hell of a fight, and revisiting Bombing Mission as we heard it before wouldn't feel appropriate. Getaway leaps right into that cyclical movement with the strong percussion line, but the strings play an octave higher, giving the piece a thicker feeling. There's less need to hear voices over this music. No guards to fight, no callouts to teammates. Just a constant push to go faster. When we hit the first melody of Bombing Mission, things really get interesting. Sound familiar? Bombing Mission gives us space to hear these two melodies distinctly as a call and response. In Getaway, these themes play simultaneously, competing for your attention. While the remake's variant of Bombing Mission added new content to give variance of intensity, letting us have intimate, quiet moments, Getaway is a reimagining of Bombing Mission whose sole purpose is to be as harried and frenetic as possible. It's not just because this piece is faster either. The reason these lines must tumble over each other is because Getaway isn't in the same time signature. Bear with me while we get a little bit technical here. Bombing Mission is in common time, 4 pulses or beats per measure, with the strongest pulse on the first and third beat. This is often referred to as a march because it feels like steady walking. But this piece is in what's called compound meter. Compound meter is when each beat of the bar divides naturally into 3 equal parts. Each beat contains a triple pulse. Normally, music divides into twos. Common time gets written like this: 4 beats in a measure divided by quarter notes. When you subdivide these notes, you can still feel those 4 pulses. We've been writing Bombing Mission this way, but used triplets to get those sets of 3s inside the march feeling of 4 beats. If we wanted to write this same piece in compound meter, you'd write it like this: 12 beats in a measure divided by 1/8 notes. Arguing about whether to use compound meter or triplets to get that 3-pulse feel is the sort of thing best left to theorists, and trust me, we'll fight all day over that. But in practice, it doesn't really matter unless you have a piece that feels weird. Getaway has this weird, too fast feeling at the end of each measure, but it also feels like there are too many notes for it to be Bombing Mission. That's because there are. This piece is in 16/8. We have 4 sets of 3, and then an extra 2 sets of 2 at the end. You can't march to this beat. It feels like taking half a step every 2 strides before racing to catch up with yourself. It has too many pulses to be Bombing Mission, but not enough to ever feel finished. And that's how the music forces you to feel unbalanced as you race through the fiery remains of the Mako reactor. It's a more permanent state of unease than the syncopation of Let the Battles Begin. This music treats the timer as your next boss fight, going so far as to break the escape into phases like our Scorpion Sentinel. No matter where you were in the song, when you approach Jessie, you get this stinger as the area collapses and brings us into a new section of the piece, treating us to a modulation. As you dangle over a fiery pit of death, your movement is slowed to a crawl, but the music compensates by raising the pitch a whole step. This is a common trick in popular music. The very last chorus will modulate to let you know that you should get excited. We're nearing the end. But we aren't even close to escaping the reactor room yet, and using this trick too many times can get a little silly. But the composer gets sneaky with us here. When we finally reach Jessie trapped under the rubble, there's a subtle stinger of a ride cymbal leading us into this more emotional string melody, leaving space in the music to have a brief conversation. When we get her on her feet again, we've modulated back down to the previous key. Because it was hidden in this short animatic, you don't even feel the loss of momentum. When you finally reach the door to leave the reactor room, we use that same subtle stinger leading us to the emotional strings again as your team debates leaving members behind. And that's really the bulk of this piece. Getaway is just a short snippet of Bombing Mission, tumbling over itself in unsettling ways as you and Barrett battle your way out, fighting against the evil foe of numbers getting ever smaller. When you finally make your way to the elevator, this scene highlights the timer reaching 0, And before the piece resolves, this sinister melody of Shinra oozes in. But like all of Getaway, it has too many notes, and it's a little off from how it should be. And with one press of a button, Getaway returns, and we're treated to an explosion worthy of eco-terrorists. The tone shifts to one of curious investigation, reinforcing our team has no idea what just happened, and we get a very tiny bit of the darker section of the main theme. As we're given control of Cloud again, we go back to Getaway, which ties up with some crazy acrobatics. And finally, the strings fall with the debris, and horns signal the end of our first chapter, leaving us with no musical resolution to accompany the feeling of dread of the damage wrought by our heroes. As it should be with the demo section of the game, the first chapter of Final Fantasy VII Remake gives us a taste of everything to come. Impressive graphical reimaginings, a faithful but expanded story, and a soundtrack that both honors the themes and concepts of the original and takes those familiar melodies to new and exciting places. But there are still a lot of old faces and familiar themes yet to talk about, including some of the most iconic music as we enter Chapter 2. See you next time.